Calvin Klein thought they were getting an ambassador. What they actually got was an architect of perception. Jungkook didn't just wear the clothes, he rewired the meaning of the entire brand. And from that moment on, Calvin Klein stopped controlling the image. Jungkook did. What separates Jungkook from any other global ambassador is not fame, not reach, not even aesthetic fit. It's self-awareness. He understands how he exists within culture, how a single photograph, a pause, or a quiet gaze can move millions. That awareness gives him control. When he stands in front of the Calvin Klein lens, he isn't following a creative direction. He's rewriting it. Every movement, every look carries his signature restraint, his sense of balance. The camera doesn't lead him, it follows him. Calvin Klein built its empire on provocation. Jungkook shifted it to precision. The power of his image doesn't come from exposure or boldness, but from intention. He knows exactly what to reveal and what to hold back. That tension, the quiet between confidence and control, is what keeps people watching. Brands can't engineer that. Calvin Klein can dress him, light him, pose him, but the atmosphere that surrounds him belongs to him alone. He generates the emotional temperature of every campaign without ever saying a word. What makes this dynamic remarkable is how effortlessly Jungkook bends the brand to his rhythm. Calvin Klein campaigns used to speak with one voice, sharp, loud, and provocative. Now they speak softly precise, modern, and minimal. The same qualities that define him. His discipline filters through every frame. The poses are measured, the mood intentional. It's not Calvin Klein teaching Jungkook how to represent them. It's Jungkook teaching Calvin Klein how to remain relevant in a world that values subtlety over spectacle. The brand's global influence has always relied on its ability to control the narrative of coolness. But Jungkook doesn't perform coolness. He embodies calm authority. His kind of presence doesn't ask for attention. It commands it through stillness. That's why the audience perceives Calvin Klein differently now, not as a symbol of rebellion, but as a reflection of modern composure. Jungkook changed the emotional language of the brand, simply by being himself. When you watch him in a campaign, there's no visible effort. That absence of effort is the message. It's not about trying to look powerful, it's about already being powerful enough to do nothing. His energy radiates through restraint, not excess. That distinction separates him from the model archetype Calvin Klein used to depend on. Jungkook isn't trying to sell the clothes, he's defining what it means to wear them. He doesn't promote, he transforms. Calvin Klein's creative teams can script everything down to the second, but they can't replicate the silent confidence that makes Jungkook magnetic. His power lies in understanding the psychology of observation. He knows people aren't looking for a performer, they're looking for a presence. That's why every campaign with him becomes more than a product launch. It becomes a collective experience. Fans don't react to Calvin Klein, they react to him interpreting Calvin Klein. He doesn't just fit into fashion. Fashion fits into him. The brand may set the aesthetic framework, but Jungkook decides the emotional tone. He changes the pace, the focus, the feel. Even the still images seem to breathe differently when he's in them. It's not charisma in the traditional sense, it's calibration. He knows exactly how much to give, how long to hold eye contact, how to communicate control through simplicity. That's what makes him untouchable in visual storytelling. And Calvin Klein can't manage that kind of authenticity. The brand can replicate style, but it can't replicate self-possession. Jungkook's strength doesn't depend on design or direction. It's internal. It's the same discipline that built his career. Every stage, every performance, every shift in his sound has been executed with full control over narrative. That mindset doesn't switch off when he steps into a campaign. It carries over, overpowering even the structures of a global fashion giant. The industry rarely sees an artist who holds both mystery and accessibility at once. Jungkook manages that duality instinctively. He lets people close enough to feel his presence, but never close enough to define it. Calvin Klein once owned that kind of mystique. Now it's Jungkook's signature. When people talk about him in Calvin Klein campaigns, they're not talking about what he's wearing, they're talking about what he's not saying. The silence is what speaks. That's narrative control at its purest form. Calvin Klein's marketing model has always relied on intensity, big statements, physicality, provocation. Jungkook dismantled that with minimalism. He shows how power can be quiet and how visibility doesn't have to mean exposure. In doing so, he flipped the entire marketing formula. Now the brand depends on his tone, his pacing, his understated magnetism. He isn't adapting to Calvin Klein's system. The system is adapting to him. Every new campaign reinforces this imbalance. Calvin Klein's name trends, but always next to his. The audience isn't discussing the campaign direction, fabric, or design concept. They're analyzing Jungkook's expressions, his movement, his atmosphere. The brand becomes an accessory to the man wearing it. That's not the result of marketing genius. It's the natural consequence of personal mastery. Jungkook understands his image as both an artist and a person. He knows his influence is built on consistency. He doesn't break character, because his character is authenticity itself. That steadiness makes him impossible to control. Calvin Klein can offer direction, but they can't dictate outcome. When Jungkook steps in front of the camera, he becomes the creative axis. Everyone else orbits around him, stylists, photographers, executives, all adjusting to his pace and his precision. And it's not rebellion. It's leadership through stillness. He doesn't dominate by force, he dominates by presence. That's why Calvin Klein's identity has quietly shifted from brand first to Jungkook first. His image embodies calm power, something the brand hadn't been able to achieve through decades of campaigns filled with noise and motion. The shift didn't come from design innovation. It came from Jungkook's internal rhythm. He doesn't chase image control, he naturally owns it. His choices are deliberate, from the way he stands to the way he looks away from the lens. Every micro gesture reflects an understanding of how perception works. That's why Calvin Klein's attempts to expand his narrative often fail. They can't create a new Jungkook image, because every iteration is already his design. Even when the concept changes monochrome, denim, leather, or minimal white, his essence dominates. No photographer can out-direct him. They can only capture him. The reason Calvin Klein is losing control isn't about power struggles, it's about identity hierarchy. Jungkook doesn't represent the brand represents him. People buy Calvin Klein now, not because of the logo, but because of the feeling that surrounds him. He's not just an ambassador, he's the atmosphere that defines the brand's current existence. Every frame becomes a study of Jungkook's world, his silence, his confidence, his clarity. Calvin Klein has become the medium, not the message. When a brand's visual identity starts mirroring one person's internal balance, control is already gone. Calvin Klein's global strategy can't outpace the organic influence Jungkook holds. His fans don't wait for campaigns. They create momentum long before the release. His presence alone moves the algorithm, dictates the news cycle, and shapes public interpretation. That's influence that no brand can buy or command. It's earned through time, consistency, and authenticity. The irony is that Jungkook never seems to chase influence. His control doesn't come from assertion, but but from alignment. He stays true to his own visual and emotional language, and the world adjusts. Calvin Klein, once the leader of pop culture aesthetics, is now keeping up with him. They follow his silence, match his tone, mirror his refinement. In marketing terms, that's the moment when a brand stops leading and starts following. Jungkook's control doesn't come from strategy meetings or rehearsed posture. It comes from discipline, the kind of discipline built through years of precise self-management. His understanding of timing, presentation, and restraint allows him to manipulate attention without appearing to try. Calvin Klein's campaigns depend on that rhythm now because their aesthetic equilibrium rests on his timing. He has become the invisible director of their visual language. Every photo, every campaign moment reveals the same truth. Jungkook is not participating in Calvin Klein's identity. Calvin Klein is participating in Jungkook's. The balance that once defined brand ambassador relationships no longer exists. He's not inside their framework, he's the framework itself. His values, simplicity, composure, perfection through control are now the cornerstones of the company's global message. They can't detach from him without losing coherence. What Calvin Klein underestimated was how self-defined Jungkook already was. He didn't need their validation, and that independence is what makes his presence so commanding. He can walk into a studio, stand still, and create a narrative stronger than any ad campaign script. That's creative dominance, subtle but absolute. The brand can only amplify what he allows them to. The moment he withdraws, their momentum collapses. And this is where control fades completely. Calvin Klein built campaigns around physicality. Jungkook built his influence around poise. They built an image through provocation. He built his through balance. Their old formula doesn't fit him, but instead of reshaping him, the brand reshaped itself to fit him. That's how a star surpasses the system that hired him through identity so strong that even corporations surrender to it. Jungkook's story inside Calvin Klein isn't about fashion collaboration. It's about power through authenticity. He redefined what it means to be an ambassador, not a representative of a brand, but the embodiment of an ideal. His discipline, his silence, his measured presence form the new foundation of Calvin Klein's global appeal. And because that essence is his, not theirs, they can never fully control it. That's the truth behind every campaign. Calvin Klein isn't guiding Jungkook. Jungkook is guiding Calvin Klein. And once a brand reaches that point, control is no longer in their hands. It rests in the hands of the one man who never needed their spotlight to begin with. For Calvin Klein, the risk is long-term stability. The more they merge their identity with his essence, the harder it becomes to move without him. The brand that once prided itself on independence now relies on a single human force to maintain relevance. If Jungkook evolves artistically, Calvin Klein must evolve visually. If he retreats into privacy, the brand's visibility slows. His personal rhythm is now their marketing calendar, and no brand, no matter how powerful, can truly control that. Jungkook doesn't belong to any brand. That's what makes him powerful. He collaborates, but never conforms. His individuality remains intact in every frame. That refusal to dilute himself is what makes Calvin Klein's image richer and also what keeps them vulnerable. They can capture his brilliance, but they can't own it. Every campaign feels like a glimpse, never a possession. He gives just enough to ignite obsession, but never enough to lose ownership of himself. That balance is what keeps the world fascinated and the brand dependent. He represents what every brand wants, but can never manufacture authenticity that scales globally. Calvin Klein can translate that into sales, but they can't replicate the source. Jungkook's control doesn't come from loud statements or visual shock. It comes from precision, self-command, and presence. He understands that real influence is quiet, consistent, and undeniable. And that's exactly why Calvin Klein can't escape him, because his silence is louder than their campaigns. When future analysts look back at this era, they won't see Calvin Klein leading Jungkook. They'll see Jungkook redefining Calvin Klein. His image became the blueprint for a new generation of branding, one where the artist defines the corporation, not the other way around. The shift isn't dramatic, it's surgical, and it's already complete. Calvin Klein may still own the trademark, but Jungkook owns the moment